Hi! Welcome again to Study with Sir G. Bago natin ipagpatuloy yung lectures natin sa Understanding Culture, Society, and Politics, review muna natin yung nakaraang module, which is Culture and Society. So last time, ang mga diniscuss natin sa Culture and Society are first is the types of culture, types of societies. So we have the hunting and gathering, pastoral, horticultural, agricultural, feudal, industrial, and post-industrial. Diniscuss din natin yung mga major factors of socio-cultural change. For example, yung physical factors, demographic, etc. Diniscuss din natin yung mga types of culture. We have the material culture and the non-material culture. And lastly, diniscuss natin yung mga characteristics of culture, which is culture is learned, culture is dynamic, culture is integrated, culture is shared, and culture is based on symbols. In this module, we will discuss about understanding further cultures, especially yung differences in culture. Okay. In our ebook, in the ebook that I made, there's a review part wherein you can play a game which is about our previous module. Okay. So to continue our lecture for today, let's start the organization of culture. Okay. So we have learned from the last module that culture is dynamic rather than static. Okay. So it is continually changing. New materials are constantly being created, as are new words, beliefs, and ideas. The different elements in culture, both existing and new, are organized and patterned so that the various elements tend to fit each other and integrate to constitute a uniform concept of social behavior. An individual interested in studying a given culture can analyze it by breaking it down into levels and study each level separately. These levels are the culture traits, culture complex, and culture patterns. So, in order to study further yung culture, mas maintindihan natin, kunyari, yung culture ng isang society, pwede natin siyang i-break down. Parang, kunyari, nag-aaral tayo ng mathematics, instead of studying the whole formula, pwede nating i-break down step by step yung formula. Ganon din sa pag-aaral ng culture. So, yung mga levels ng culture, ito yung culture trait, culture complex, tsaka culture patterns. So, culture trait. Culture trait are the smallest units of culture and called culture traits. A culture trait cannot be broken down into smaller units. It is related to a specific need or situation. Each trait, be it material or non-material, is a result of social interaction and conveys some meaning. Material and non-material traits are closely associated with each other. A material trait such as a spoon and fork is associated to the non-material trait of eating with spoon and fork. Traits can also be combined, such as the use of po and opo, which express Filipino politeness, is combined with the English greeting with hello, and thus the Philippinized Western greeting hello po is created. So yung napag-aralan natin last time na types of culture, yung non-material and material culture, ito yung mga tinatawag nating culture traits. Okay? So related itong mga material tsaka non-material culture. Doon nga sa sinabi example, yung paggamit natin ng yung material culture natin is yung kutsara at tinidor. Ngayon, yung practice natin, the non-material culture, which is the practice of eating with utensils, yan is related dun nga sa material culture natin. So, interrelated yung material culture tsaka non-material culture. Pwede ring mag-combine yung mga culture traits, individual culture traits. Yung binigay na example, yung greetings natin, di ba? Filipino is gumagamit tayo ng po at opo. Tapos English, yung hello, hi. Ngayon, pag pinag-combine natin ito, nagkakaroon tayo ng bagong pananalita na hello po. Ito yung tinatawag nating Taglish. Yan. So, next, culture complex. Culture traits don't work separately yet are identified with other traits in some sort of important relationship. They are commonly grouped and every trait in the group is defined just as far as its dynamic relationship with other traits. Combined culture traits are called culture complexes. For example, making the sign of the cross, kneeling, reading from a novena booklet, singing, and giving a blessing are components of novena complex. The ballot, marker pen, indelible ink, putting one's thumb mark on the ballot, entering a small booth, selecting a candidate from the list, and entering the ballot in the precinct count optical scanner or the PICOS machine, when grouped together, forms the voting complex. So, yung mga culture traits natin, pwede nating ipag-combine, pagsama-samahin, i-group together, at magiging culture complex. Yung sa example nga natin. Okay. Dun sa novena complex, yung mga culture traits doon, yun nga, yung pagluhod, pagbasa sa novena, dun sa panguros, yun. Or dun sa complex na kapag election, diba, yung individual culture traits doon, yung maglalagay tayo ng indelible ink, and then magvo-vote na. So, yung mga pinagsama-samang individual traits na yon, kapag naging group na, tinatawag natin culture complex. Yan. So, culture pattern. Culture complexes are clustered to form large units called culture patterns. A culture pattern is the combination of several culture complexes into an interrelated whole. An outstanding case of this is the interest of Filipinos in the sport of basketball. Basketball is viewed as the most famous sport in the Philippines. It can be seen being played in the urban and rural areas, amateur and professional league. So, the culture pattern group culture complexes. Yung binigyan example sa basketball. Sa basketball, maraming culture complex dyan. Meron dyan yung complex kapag sa rural na paglalaro lang ng basketball. Yung may isang ring lang, 3x3, ganon. Tapos walang rules na ginagamit. Yun. Or meron din complex dun sa official league. For example, sa UAAP. Okay. Meron yung complex ng tip-off, tapos ongoing na yung play, merong referee, ganon. So, lahat ng mga complex na to ay kasama sa culture pattern ng basketball sa Pilipinas. Okay. Next. So, na-discuss natin yung pagbre-breakdown ng cultures, traits, complex, and pattern. Ngayon, i-discuss natin yung participation ng individual or members of the society sa isang particular practice or culture. So, not all individual in a certain society participate in all the components of their culture. The level of participation among the members of the society depends on their age, sex, occupation, or requirements of the culture. The level of cultural participation are classified by three by Linton as referred to by Panopio et al. Okay. So, yung level of participation ng mga members ng society sa culture ay nakadepende sa edad, kasarian, trabaho, or kung ano man yung pangangailangan ng kultura. So, yung three classifications is first, culture universal. Cultural universals are culture traits, complexes, and patterns found in all cultures. These are shared among all individuals from a given population. They are essential for the existence of a given society. For instance, to address their need of sustenance, all societies have some sort of technology to obtain food, such as agriculture. To address their need for shelter, people in all societies build some sort of housing such as a grass hut, igloo, wooden house, or brick building. To address their need for communication, all societies develop symbol and language. To address their need for creative and religious experience, people make artistic expressions such as music, painting, and literature, and believe in some sort of religion. So, culture universal, yung tawag sa common aspects sa lahat ng culture. Pinapractice ito ng lahat ng tao regardless of which society he or she belongs. Example, yung mga binigyan na example is gathering food. Lahat ng tao kailangan ng pagkain. So, lahat ng tao merong practice of gathering food like or manufacturing food like agriculture. Another example, lahat ng societies kailangan mapangalagaan yung order dun sa kanilang lugar. Kaya lahat ng mga societies merong law. So, law is another example of cultural universal. And next, specialties. Specialties are behavior expectations restricted to specific subgroups which usually requires unusual skill or training and indicate the division of work and hierarchy of statuses in culture. These are not shared by everyone in the society. For example, baby nursing is a female specialty, not shared by men. Almost groups in society, each age group, sex group, occupational group, religious group, have certain traits not shared by other groups. So, specialties are cultures na pinapractice lang ng specific people or specific group of people. Example, ang breastfeeding. Okay. Sino lang ang gumagawa nito? Mga babae lang. Kasi sila nga lang yung may kakayahan na gumawa nito. Another example, bawat type of work, merong kanya-kanyang culture yan. Okay? Iba yung kultura ng mga teachers, iba yung kultura ng mga pulis. So, yung mga practice ng teachers, hindi yan pinapractice ng mga pulis, and vice versa. Next, alternatives. Alternatives are behavior expectations that allow a variation in human behavior to a certain degree. These are shared by some members of society but not common to all individuals. For example, the common way of courting a girl nowadays is by visiting her, bringing flowers or other things, exchanging messages or calls, or bringing the girl out for a date. However, there are alternatives to such actions, such as rendering service to the girl's family or by gaining the approval of the family first before the girl. So, alternatives, ito yung mga culture na merong alternative sa certain practice. Example, sa binigyan na example sa panliligaw. Okay. Yung isang lalaki, pwede siyang manligaw by bibisitahin yung babae, magbibigay ng flowers or gift, ganon. Or, alternatively, ang isang lalaki, pwedeng manligaw by rendering service, ganon. Or, yung parents ang liligawan niya muna para makuha ang loob ng pamilya bago yung babae. So, alternative practices sila, pero patungkol lahat ito sa panliligaw sa babae. Ganon. Next. So, let us discuss more concepts about culture. Okay. So, other cultural concepts. Strong support for cultural universals makes culture more resistant to change. However, the prevalence of specialties may divide the culture into to many contending or clashing subcultures. O, nabanggit na, subcultures. Ano nga ba ang subculture? Subcultures are smaller groups within the society which have developed their own norms, values, belief, and or special languages which make them unique from the larger society. These subgroups may be based on age, social class, occupational, educational, political, or religious interests or inclinations, regions and ethnicity, or other specific interests or distinction. Okay. So, ano ba yung mga example ng subculture? First, sa age. So, na-classify ang population ngayon according to age. At meron yung baby boomers, pinanganak mula 1946 to 1964. Meron yung Generation X, pinanganak mula 1965 to 1980. Generation Y or yung mga tinatawag ngayon na millennials, sila yung mga pinanganak from 1981 to 1985, and Generation Z, sila yung mga pinanganak 1996 to 2015. Yung mga pinanganak after 2015, magkakaroon sila ngayon ng bagong classification. Magkakaroon yung name of classification, iba na yung tawag. Okay. So, bawat age group na ito nagkaroon ng kanya-kanyang culture or paniniwala or values. Depende yan sa mga experience nila nung age nila. Example, yung mga baby boomers, iba yung values nila kasi naranasan nila yung buhay pagkatapos ng World War II. Wala pang technology doon. Compared sa ating mga millennials na naranasan natin yung buhay na nagsisimula pa lang dumamay yung technology, and until now na-experience natin yung advancement ng technology. Iba naman yung practice and values natin. Okay. Next, we have social class. So we have the slum dwellers or squatters, middle class or the mansion and condominium owners. So yung mga subculture ng nasa lower class is kaiba yung mga paniniwala and values nila compared sa mga kabilang sa higher class of status. Okay. So, yung mga mahirap, iba yung practices nila, paano sila kumain, and mamuhay, iba rin yung practices ng mga nakatira sa mga mansions, condominium, nun. Next, occupational, nabanggit na rin natin, di ba? Iba yung culture ng doctors, lawyers, police. Bawat trabaho may kanya-kanyang culture yan, kung paano nila gawin yung trabaho nila. Next, educational. Yung mga nag-aaral sa mga universities, nagkakaroon sila ng sariling mga paniniwala or values. Example, yung mga nag-aaral sa UP, tinatawag silang mga ISCO or ISCA. Okay? Meron silang sariling values compared sa mga nag-aaral sa Ateneo or mga Ateneans, mga taga-Lasal, Lasalians, taga Santo Tomas, Tomasian. Okay. Next, political. So, ito yung mga tinatawag nating subgroups na DDS, mga Dilawan, or meron din tayong mga tinatawag na Neo-Marcos apologists. Okay, so itong mga grupo na to, merong kanya-kanya ding mga paniniwala at pinapahalagahan. Next, religious interests or inclinations. So, yung mga different religious groups natin, examples, Roman Catholics, Muslims, Iglesia ni Cristo, Born Again, mga kasama sa fellowships like CCF Victory, tapos yung mga agnostic tsaka atheist, sila yung mga hindi naniniwala sa Diyos. Ganun. So, bawat grupo na ito, meron silang kanya-kanyang practice ng kanilang rituals or worship. Ganun. Okay, next. Regions and ethnicity. Okay. So, for example, sa Pilipinas, maraming grupo yan. Marami pang grupo ng mga tao. For example, mga taga-NCR, Manila. Actually, nadi-divide pa yan. Meron mga taga-North and mga taga-South. Okay. Mga Tagalog, dun sa Southern Tagalog, tsaka Central Luzon, meron ding kanya-kanyang type of language din yan minsan eh. Iba yung language or yung accent ng mga taga Batangas, iba yung accent ng mga Laguna, taga Laguna, Quezon, Rizal, and Bulacan. Okay. And then, marami pang ibang ethnic groups at na merong sariling values or practices like the Igorots, Ifugaos, Ilocano, Pangasinan, Pampango, Bisaya, Bicolano, Waray. Sa Mindanao, meron tayong mga Mangyan, Tausug, tsaka Badjao. Yan. Okay, next. Other specific interests. So, yung mga tao na may common interest, kapag kapag nagsasama-sama sila, nagkakaroon sila ng mga sariling mga practices or values. Example, weebs. Okay. Weebs ang tawag dun sa mga non-Japanese people, pero how they act is ginagaya nila yung mga Japanese. Okay. Example, yung mga weebs, alam nila yung mga paano yung language, kahit hindi naman sila expert, ganun, pero nalalaman nila, or yung practice, yan, pinapractice nila yung Japanese ways, ganun. Meron tayong mga tinatawag na otakus. Otakus yung mga mahilig sa anime at manga. Meron din tayong mga cosplayers, yung mga mahilig na mag-costume. Okay. Meron yung mga J-poppers, mahilig sa Japanese music. K-poppers, Japanese, Korean pop music. Meron tayong mga groups like TikTokers, Wattpads, casino gamers, mobile gamers, the EDSA commuter. Yan. So, yung buhay ng mga EDSA commuter, maaga silang nagigising para mag-abang ng sasakyan, makipagsiksikan sa mga pasahero, ganun. Meron tayong mga balikbayan, the night owls yung mga tulog sa umaga, gising sa gabi. Online shoppers, titos and titas. Sino ba itong mga titos and titas? Ito yung mga middle age or sa mga late 20s, early 30s, late 20s, 30s, 40s, pero hanggang ngayon hindi pa daw nagkakaroon ng boyfriend o girlfriend. Sila yung mga titos and titas. Meron ding mga plantitos and plantitas. Bago yan, ito yung mga individuals na mahilig mangolekta ng mga halaman. Meron din tayong mga bikers, mga riders, mga jejemons, tsaka geologs. Yan. So, itong mga binanggit na ito yung mga iba't ibang klase ng subculture. Okay, next. Contra-culture or counterculture. These are subcultures who cling to the principles that come in conflict with and contradict the conventional standards. Their norms and values oppose those of the dominant culture. Among these are the LGBTQ community, groups of juvenile delinquents, drug addicts, prostitutes, gun totters, rebels, smugglers, terrorists. Their behavior is called deviant. So, yung mga deviances, madidiscuss natin yan further sa Module 5. The presence of contra-culture may open the possibilities of social class. Accordingly, these subgroups become a danger to the overall social values and are considered social problems. Though, exception na ngayon yung LGBTQ community, hindi na siya threat kasi unti-unti na nating natatanggap yung culture nila. Though meron pa ring mga resistant sa kanila, nagkakaroon na tayo ng mga batas para yung mga karapatan natin ay maging kapareho sa mga nasa LGBTQ community. Okay. The other groups, for example, the juvenile delinquents, drug addicts, prostitute, and so on, ito yung may mga nalalabag na batas or yung mga gawain nila ay nakakasama sa ibang mga tao. Sila yung mga tinuturing ngayon na threats ng ating society. Okay. Culture clash. The difference of cultural universals may result in conflict, such as the contradiction of socialism and capitalism. A common example of culture clash is the difference of language around the world. However, this does not necessarily mean conflict or violence. For instance, the different dialects in the Philippines may pose as a barrier in our national progress. Okay. So, extreme example ng culture clash. Ito, clash, naglalaban sila eh. Yan. Contradicting. Example nito ay yung socialism noon tsaka capitalism. Anong resulta? Ito yung Cold War. Yan. Another is resulta din ng Cold War is yung Korean War, Vietnam Wars, lahat yan related sa pagkakaiba ng ideology ng socialism and capitalism. Okay. Meron ding religion related. Diba? Religion is a universal culture. Ngayon, kapag nag-clash ang religion, such as, I think in history, meron tayong tinatawag na 30 years war noon sa Europe. It is the war between the Catholics and the Protestants. Okay? Then, meron ding yung Pakistan and India. Nag-clash ang religion ng Hinduism and Islam. Yan. So, yun yung mga extreme example ng culture clash na nag-result into violence. Pero hindi ibig sabihin na may culture clash ay merong violence. Example, sa Pilipinas, dahil sa iba't ibang dialects, hindi maiwasan na hindi magkaintindihan. Yan. Example, Ilocano tsaka Pangasinan. Yung tao na salita sa Ilocano, hindi tao doon sa Pangasinan. I think Too. Too ata ang tawag nila sa tao. Ganun. So, to continue, ito na. How people see cultures. Yung sariling culture and yung culture ng ibang tao. Let's start with ethnocentrism. So, ethnocentrism is the perspective where one sees his or her own culture as the best and better than those of others. Culture traits and patterns are evaluated based on what is familiar. Thinking that their group is superior, the members at times look at outsiders with contempt. Okay. So, yung ethnocentrism, ang tingin, example ng ethnocentrism is yung tingin ng isang tao sa kultura niya ay superior or tama compared sa culture ng ibang tao. Inferior yung culture ng ibang tao or mali yung culture ng ibang tao. Ganun yung view ng ethnocentrism. Okay. As indicated by Gordon, as referred to by Panopio et al., the function of ethnocentrism is to build one's appreciation and commitment to one's cultural group. This view reinforces group morale, strengthens unity within the group, and boosts individual pride and esteem to one's culture. Then again, extreme ethnocentrism hinders one's comprehension of other cultures and prompts narrow-mindedness and bias. Hindi naman masama ang ethnocentrism. However, hindi naman masama kasi effects ng ethnocentrism, nagkakaroon ka ng pride sa sariling kultura. For example, proud to be Filipino. Okay. Masaya ako na Pilipino ako. Yan. Pero yung extreme example ng ethnocentrism is that hindi niya na iniintindi yung other culture. Kung ano yung tingin niya sa ibang kultura, na inferior or weird, mali, hindi na mababago. Yan. Examples of ethnocentric views are the poem of Rudyard Kipling, The White Man's Burden. People of different nationalities asserting that their country is the most progressive in the world, the Tagalogs thinking they are superior than other ethnicities. One's religion is claimed as the true religion as opposed to that of the others, and a school boasting that they give the highest level of education. So those are examples of ethnocentrism. Yung white man's burden, if di nyo pa to narinig, kumbaga ang sinasabi nito is parang tungkulin daw ng mga Europeans or Americans na sumakop sa mga bansa ginawang kolonya na baguhin yung hindi tamang kultura ng mga tao dun sa sinakop nilang lugar. Ganun. So they think that their culture is superior than the culture of the country na sinakop nila. Another example, yung extreme pride na yung bansa nila ang the best in the world. Yan. Na inaaway na nila yung ibang bansa. Or pwede rin na yung ethnicity is kunyari mga Tagalog, dahil yung salita nila ay national language na Filipino, very similar, parang iniisip na superior ethnicity sila kaysa sa ibang mga ethnicities. Or so yun mga examples of ethnocentrism. So xenocentrism. Xenocentrism is the notion that foreign product, idea, and or lifestyle is superior than one's own culture. So it is called reverse ethnocentrism. So kabaliktaran ng ethnocentrism, yung xenocentrism. Okay. Instances of this perspective are when Filipinos prefer imported products over local ones, and when some Filipinos still prefer to live and work abroad, even if their standing in that foreign country is no better than here in the Philippines. So, example of xenocentrism, yung mga mahihilig sa imported na gamit. Hindi sila namimili ng local products dito sa Pilipinas kasi para sa kanila, superior ang product ng ibang bansa kaysa sa mga produkto ng Pilipinas. Another example of xenocentrism, yung mga iniisip nila, mas maganda ang buhay sa ibang bansa kaysa sa Pilipinas. Yan. So, yung bang kakagraduate pa lang, iniisip niya na mag-abroad. Gusto niya nang mamuhay sa ibang bansa. Yan. Next. Culture shock. Culture shock happens when one experiences another culture. He or she gets bewildered or confused. This individual loses the common signs and symbols of social intercourse he is accustomed to, and may encounter some distastefulness or frustrations. It may be a response to unpalatable food, which one may think as upsetting. The incapacity to perform regular activities like sleeping or moving one's bowels, an aversion to the norms and values of the group, or inability to communicate with the members of the new society. It is a reflection of a strong sense of ethnocentrism where one is unable to immediately adapt to the lifestyle of his or her new surroundings. So, culture shock, nangyayari ito kapag naka-encounter or naka-experience ng bagong practices ang isang tao. Like kung sakali is nag-migrate siya sa ibang bansa or nag-stay lang, bumisita siya sa isang lugar. So, paano nangyayari yung culture shock? Example nito, yung mga kakalipat lang sa bagong bahay or meron kang napangasawa tapos lumipat ka sa bahay ng asawa mo, yan, minsan yung feeling na namamahay, hindi ka makatulog, and so example yun ng culture shock. Another example, yung mga foreigners na bigla silang, yung nagugulat sila na yung kumakain tayo ng balot, di ba? Hindi kasi sila kumakain nung balot. Yun yung may sisiw doon sa loob ng itlog. Yan. So nagugulat yung mga foreigners sa atin. Yan. So another example is that yung hindi mo maintindihan yung language nung doon sa lugar na pinuntahan mo. So yun yung culture shock. Okay. So how do we cope up with these views? Kasi kapag extreme ethnocentrism, xenocentrism, culture shock, mahirapan kang intindihin yung mga tao dun sa society na kaiba sa kultura mo. So, paano ka makipag-communicate? Paano ka makipag-cooperate? Paano kayo magkakaroon ng maayos na pamumuhay? So, dito pumapasok yung cultural relativism. Cultural relativism is an alternative view to ethnocentrism. When people encounter another culture, they will most likely judge it as strange, exotic, weird, or immoral. However, what these people reckon as funny, weird, or immoral may be considered as appropriate, normal, and moral by the people of the other culture. So, totoo naman kapag na-culture shock ka, i-judge mo ngayon yung culture nila na hindi maganda, strange, ganun, or immoral. Example, meron yung culture na anong bansa ito? Yung bagong kasal sa Greece ata, yan. So yung bagong kasal, yung babae dinuduraan nila. 'Di ba? Kung hindi ka taga doon, magugulat ka talaga. 'Yun. Or mandidiri ka. Yun. So cultures diverse, that is why a cultural trait can only be defined by the context of the society it belongs to. A trait is good or bad only with the references to the culture in which it functions. So, para maintindihan mo yung kultura ng ibang tao or yung mga tao doon sa bagong society na pinuntahan mo, yung practices nila, yung culture nila, wag mong i-judge or based sa culture mo. Kasi, kung doon sa culture mo, yun yung tama doon sa lugar nyo. Pero yung gawain nila, yun yung tama doon sa lugar nila. So, ikaw yung mag-adapt sa lugar nila. Kumbaga, it doesn't mean na palitan mo yung culture mo, pero isipin mo na yun yung gawain nila Yun yung ganun sila namuhay. Nag-survive sila na ganun yung practices nila. Yan. So, as a result of cultural diversity within and between societies, the sole judge of a culture is simply the members of the society themselves. Deeper insights into cultural diversity can be deterrent to extreme ethnocentrism and can lead to a greater and fuller realization of mankind's common humanity. So, apply natin yung cultural relativism sa individual people. Okay. Sabihin na natin sa school. Okay. Meron bagong school year, bagong mga kaklase. Ganun. So, meron kang na-encounter na kaklase mo na hindi mo agad nagustuhan kasi yung style niya, pananalita niya, ganun. Pero, hindi naman siya talaga bad person. Yun nga lang, hindi mo siya magustuhan. Yan, kasi yung practices niya or yung values niya is contradicting sa values mo or sa iniisip mo na tama. Ganun. So, ano yung paano ka makikipag-interact ngayon sa tao na hindi mo gusto? So, isipin mo na lang, okay, yung paano siya naging ganon na tao ay result nito nung ways nila sa bahay nila. Ganun yung practices nila sa bahay nila. Ganun sila magsalita sa bahay nila. Kaya, ganun yung na-adapt niya. So, sa inyo, sa bahay nyo, ganun yung ugali mo kasi ganun yung dun sa tahanan nyo. Okay. Hindi naman, as long as hindi naman nakakasama sa ibang tao yung practice niya or yung values niya, don't judge him as a bad person. Okay. So, thinking na may ganun siya dahil ganun yung upbringing niya, you can adjust when interacting with this person. So, eventually, maintindihan mo siya na bakit ganun yung personality niya, ganun yung gawain niya. Yan. So, hopefully, yung tao rin, ganun din yung magiging tingin sa'yo. Maintindihan ka rin niya. With that, magkakaroon kayo ng understanding and kapag merong kailangan, magkakaroon kayo ng cooperation. You can work together better. So, application lang ng cultural relativism sa personal lives natin. So, in conclusion, conflicts happen when one does not understand others. And to truly understand other people, every culture must be judged on its own standards. And a culture trait, complex or pattern must be received in terms of its meanings, purpose, or significance in the culture of which it belongs. That is cultural relativism. Okay. So, if you have downloaded the interactive ebook that I made, meron din itong quiz wherein you can evaluate your learnings regarding this module. So, okay. So, with that, this ends my lecture video in the module 3 of Understanding Culture, Society, and Politics, which is Understanding Cultural Differences. I invite you to watch my other lecture videos, the previous lecture videos, by subscribing in my YouTube channel. Thank you.